how social media set culture adrift. That's invention of Chris. And culture is the source of our collective identities, and culture provides basic categories which allow us to get adequate, let me use a military notion, categories that allow us to get adequate situational awareness. When culture goes adrift, we lose the capacity to have adequate situational awareness on all levels of our life, our private life, our institutional life, and on the level of nation states' decision-making process. And we, the conservatives, are losing the culture game because we have lost the situational awareness. When culture drifts, our understanding drifts. And when our understanding drifts, we become victims of those who are able to maintain acute situational awareness. Who are these unique beings? Please be patient, and you may find my answer interesting. The state of modern Western culture is perplexing not only to rank-and-file people, but also to experts and those to whom experts are trying to tell the truth. How did such a predicament of confusion become so pervasive? I answered the question via three major steps of argumentation. Point one, modern communication technologies, mainly social media, have propelled what were previously fringe motifs into the mainstream of public discourse and popular attention and imagination. Second, this has severely undermined the senses of normality, reality, and rationality, even the elementary idea of cause and effect that are essential to any shared culture. Third, and it has severely undermined the traditional mechanisms of representative politics and self-government, which require a modicum of deliberation and compromise within a public conception of nations, nature, history, constraints, and aspirations. Due to the operations of various algorithms that control information flow on social media, certain ever-present motifs within human cultures, motifs which for centuries typically remained on the fringes of public communication, have been thrust into the mainstream focus of public imagination. These motifs include an expansion of bullshit in Harry Frankfurt's book sense, New Age-like irrationalities, obsession with conspiracies, the extremization of us-them dichotomies, the normalization of hate speech, various perversions, and the advocacy of hedonism and hyper-individualistic attitudes. No surprise that typical internet traffic is sport, porn, cat shorts, hate speech, lifestyles, conspiracy obsessions, and the likes. What is the relationship between the bullshit and lies? Probably I shall contradict yesterday's wonderful lecture of Professor Legutko. But as a sociologist, I perceive bullshit much serious threat to sound to culture than lies. Why this is the case? When you lie, you know the truth. You want to hide the truth. When you issue bullshit, the issue of truth or false is not relevant to you. You want to express yourself, you induce your emotions, the truth becomes irrelevant. And the point is that probably if we would be looking for the most prevalent motives in electronic communication, that would be bullshit. Something that has not an unidentified relation between communication and the beyond words realities. Bullshitters, even while tortured, cannot tell you the truth because they don't know it. Generally, there has happened a structural change of places. Some cultural motifs were promoted from the fringe to the center, whereas other motifs have been moved from the center to some obscure niches. And this can be summarized as follows. The easy and unsavory has supplanted the difficult and the noble. That's the condition of the present Western culture. Referring to Steven Pinker of Harvard University book entitled Better Angels of Our Nature, one could say that due to the impact of social media, the inferior, the worst angels of our nature were summoned and fed amply. Pinker referred to diminishing amount of violence among people in his book. But we see the increasing amount of bullshit communication in our life that denigrates not only social realms, but also our interior, psychic interior, including our subconsciousness. Why new communication technologies succeeded? They succeeded because their operation is based on simple brain mechanisms of seeking pleasure, and that awakes the bitter versions of us. This engenders a sort of entropy of the social, and this is against the civilizing process in Norbert Elias' sense. My claim is that the bottom line of the digital revolution so far is a reversal of the civilizing process in the Norbert Elias sense. For Elias, the civilizing process meant the diffusion of anti-violence mentalities among and by the middle and upper classes since the Middle Ages, especially since the monopolization of legitimate violent punishment by the state. How was such a reversal of the civilizing process possible? My explanation follows such a line. The real is analogous. The cyber is digital. The real has become much less attractive than the cyber. That was made largely through broad range of addictive technologies imbued in almost all screen applications. Families are real. Communities are real, nations are real, tradition values and loyalties are real. Hyper-individualism is digital. Families are helpless when confronted with smartphones. So are communities, nations, and traditional loyalties. Virtually all domains of the real lose the war with the digital. Digital technology is controlled by the big tech. That's true, but it's only half the truth. According to otherwise bright piece entitled by Cara Frederick, entitled Combating Big Tech's Totalitarianism, a Roadmap, the core tenet of the issue is how the cyber lords think, how they think. to my mind, it's not the proper focus on the problem. I don't exclude that the big tech, especially the Silicon Valley big tech, is overwhelmingly leftist. But this is not the core reason of its superiority. However, because the issue is not the message that is the leftist message. The issue is not the ideology, at least on this level of analysis. This doesn't indicate the real core of the problem. The issue is not the message. The issue is, of course, the medium, but what features of the medium we need to conceptualize to identify the core problem? Not the content, by the form. The core is that the digital infosphere is algorithmically, structurally poisoned. That's key element of my diagnosis. I introduced the notion of structurally poisoned infosphere. How was this made possible? I need to go through 5 points to characterize what the structurally poisoned infosphere is. Not the content of the message, but the form. The form consists of 5 categories: overload, structure, addiction, multitasking, and haste. Let me go through them step by step. We live in an era of constant information overload. Let's imagine that in the digital infosphere, there is no disinformation, there are no lies. But even true information can overload your mind and make it impossible for you to distinguish between important and not important, to distinguish a friend from a foe and distinguish a human from a bot. The second feature of structurally poisoned infosphere is structure of the knowledge. Meaningful knowledge has been shifted into continuous, meaningless flow of fragmented information. Never equate information with knowledge. Knowledge delivers some meanings. Knowledge provides sense. Fragmented information doesn't provide any social sense. And the structure of the general structure of the realm of information is this: information, bullshit, misinformation, disinformation, and psychological operations. Third, addiction. Simple example in famous Facebook lies. According to some scholars, since the beginning of this millennium, nearly every application before it's issued online has implanted some addictive technologies. Fourth, artificially induced multitasking. I think that's pretty clear. And 5, neurotic haste. A simple example of neurotic haste are our electronic mailboxes. Email messages were to save our time, because it's easier to send an email than to go to the post office and so on, so on. But every day, we have to check a number of mail accounts with huge amounts of information and bullshit. In some, it's not the content, it's the form of the infosphere. It's structurally poisoned. What does the form stem from? And what consequences such a form of public communication engender? It's the form of the structurally poisoned infosphere that undermined traditional culture and its values. It's the form of this infosphere that has opened the weakened culture to crazy ideologies. it's the structurally poisoned infosphere that made our minds susceptible to accept the various crazy ideologies. And it's the form of the structurally poisoned infosphere that prevents us from arranging a successful reconquista. We cannot reboot the system without dealing with the structurally poisoned infosphere. Yesterday, I found here a collection of essays, an interesting collection, rebooting the American system. But I think this rebooting is impossible with first dealing with cyber lords of social media. The problem is that technology in recent decades digital technologies were developed in order to make them frictionless, to make them user-friendly as much as possible. But reaching truth is not frictionless. Reaching real communication, reaching real understanding is not frictionless. Millions of people were socialized to live in a frictionless world. But it has nothing to do with the analogous world. Analogous world is full of frictions. And, okay, that's clear. But it would be, to my mind, a serious mistake to view big tech's cyber lords as solely responsible demons for all of this. The responsibility goes to a cluster of interests and trends which are constituted by digital technologies combined with opaque mechanism of contemporary capitalism. My personal feeling is, the feeling has increased during this conference, is that national conservatists are wrong to focus on the history of ideas. They largely overlook the role of digital technologies in conjunction with opaque changes in basic capitalist institutions. The permanent information overload, artificially induced multitasking, and haste all day contribute to the degradation of the much-needed strategic tradecraft in many Western capitals. And I would summarize this part of my argument via a paradox which has been engendered by the digital revolution. The digital revolution has immensely increased the complexity of social life. At the same time, it decreased mental capacities, both of rank and file and elitist groups of people, of dealing with the new complexities. Digital revolution demands us to understand much more complex situation, but devoid us of mental capacities of dealing with them. Hannah Arendt, in a classic piece entitled I have minus time of plus time. Okay, it's to be final story. In 1967, Hannah Arendt published a classic, now we know it's classic text, Truth and Politics. And she explored the relationships between truth and politics. And she concludes on a positive note, because she says that politicians can manipulate the truth, but there are limits to successful manipulations of truth by politicians. The limits stem from the fact that facts are deeply rooted in the past. But the problem is that however interpretation of Arendt was sound at her time and for some decades to come, now the digital revolution has changed the ontology of social world. Yesterday, both Richard Legutko and Senator Hawley were talking about sort of epistemic crisis, that we lost capacity to tell the truth from lies. But my claim is stronger. We live in an era of ontological crisis, and the new technologies has allowed those that govern channels of communication to establish quasi-facts that can stand with us for years and years and years. And coming AI probably would increase this trend unless we could do something. The topic of my presentation was how social media set culture adrift. The question is how the culture can be recovered, how American or in general democratic systems could be rebooted. And my advice from the other side of the Atlantic to you Americans is such one. Washington, Beijing, de-risking is a wrong priority. The real priority is Washington, Silicon Valley de-risking. Without this de-risking, you cannot pursue any other reforms. That's the first indispensable step to be taken. Without the risking with the valley, you can't regain the strategic tradecraft necessary for Washington to master the geostrategic game. Thank you very much.